Hi, Candice. Thank you so much for coming on Authentic AI for Entrepreneurs. I'm so excited to have you on the show.
Thank you so much. I'm so excited. I've been dying to nerd out about AI, and yeah, you may have to rein me in a little.
Oh my goodness. I know we were talking before we hit record, guys, and that's how I feel every episode too. I'm just like, yay, someone else who is ready to geek out about this stuff with me. So it's going to be a great conversation. I did already introduce you just a little bit in the intro, but I'd love to hear from you. Who are you? Tell us what you do.
Awesome. Okay, well, I am a community strategist, and I like to call myself the entrepreneur in residence at the Candid Collab, which is my collaboration of basically consultants who do marketing and product work. We run a community where we help entrepreneurs and people starting out basically get into the space, especially from South Africa and the UK. I've been doing a lot of work in community, but also in community automation. I recently finished my AI mini MBA with Section. And so I've kind of been using it as an excuse to turn everything I do into something to do with how do I add AI into this, whether it's personal life and work life. So at the moment, I'm a little bit one note in terms of I just do work. I used to play dodgeball, but at the moment, it's my work, AI, and my cat.
Oh my gosh, I love that. Yeah, we get that, I think, as an entrepreneur focused podcast and stuff. That's a lot of entrepreneur life for sure. And that is so awesome. Congratulations. So let's just talk a little bit about how did you start just dipping your toes into the world of AI and using those tools?
It's actually really weird because technically where my knowledge of AI started is not in AI as we know it now. When I was in university, I studied corpus linguistics and it's basically language databases to draw conclusions about the data set. So I was doing linguistic fingerprinting, trying to figure out what pieces of language belong to certain individuals. And that basically required building what we now know as like an LLM, but probably in a much smaller scale. And then tagging language syntactically, so figuring out how different language works between one another. When AI came out, I actually was weirdly good at prompting it. And I don't even really understand why, because the way I structure my communication with computers has always come from analyzing language and trying to figure out what does language tell us about us? And so, yeah, it's actually not a very traditional, I stumbled upon an AI tool. I actually studied linguistics. And then when AI started coming out, my first big encounter with it was one of my clients actually started building an AI into his law consultancy. So they were using AI to basically check contracts and sort through contracts. And I was trying to teach people about why AI can be useful for these things, probably in 2018. So way before it was a massive hype. And I honestly didn't understand it at all in the prompting sense that we do now. It was very much back end. How does it work? What are these complex mechanics? It was quite confusing.
That's why I love to ask these questions of how did you start getting dipping your toes into this world just because it's so interesting. And it sounds like you already had a little bit of a leg up. So, as someone who is naturally inclined or educationally inclined, I guess, to pretty good prompting skills, can you share any of your favorite techniques? A lot of us know the get super specific and
Mm.
all that different stuff, but is there anything that you see people not really realizing that they should be doing when they're prompting?
Definitely, especially if you understand marketing or business, you have a persona, right? When you're talking to any one of your clients or building campaigns, you have a persona in mind. So when you're prompting, give your AI a persona. Tell it, this is what you do, this is how you think, this is what role you take. If you wanted to take on an assistant role, teach it what kind of assistant tasks you wanted to do. If you wanted to take on a strategist role and critique your work, teach it that that's the persona it's coming in with. Something like custom GPTs make that super useful because you can almost preload your prompt and teach you. Like, for example, I have a brief writer GPT that I was so tired of briefing all my consultants manually, and then it would have to be in a doc inevitably anyway. And so I basically just now built a custom GPT, and I'll have it on my little tablet, which is like my little assistant, and I'll speak to it and I'll be like, this is the brief, and it will output the brief in the exact format that I need to brief my consultants, because it is behaving like a consultant. And if I miss anything, it will ask me questions like my consultants will, because it has the mind, it is thinking in that position, So I think that is the most powerful prompting skill I know. And then the other one is structure, having structure in your prompt. So if you think about language, and this is what I learned from language, is a sentence is made of different pieces, right? You have your noun, verb, object. So think about the different parts of your prompts. Think about it as, this is your input, this is your context, this is your output. So you might want to start with context, give your prompt context, like this is what we're doing. That's where you probably add in your persona information. Then maybe you'd say, this is what kind of input you can expect. This is the kind of output I want, the format of the output. And then also think about like, what kind of rules do you want? We've all had the moment where you prompt it, and then as it gives you a response, you're like, oh, I should have seen it was going to make that silly mistake. And then you go back into your rules or your prompt and you add it to a rule or your exceptions, and you say, don't do this thing. And so I try to think of my prompts as like full-on pieces of work, or like engines that do a thing, rather than a one-time prompt, because that can get exhausting.
Totally. Oh, I love those tips. I've been just shouting from the rooftops, like, guys, train these tools on your brand, right? And it's like so amazing. I actually have a mini course called Brand Persona for ChatGPT that kind of walks you through that stuff. And like, it's not even just like training on your brand voice necessarily, although that's a part of it. Like, use a casual tone or whatever. No, it's like your brand opinions, the way you think, all that different stuff. And then also the tasks that you want it to do, right? So thank you for sharing that. And also, yeah, the structure is so important. I think because I have been maybe an educator ish for like years, starting way back when actually I was like teaching ski lessons as like a 16-year-old. I decided to be a ski instructor, and I learned how to teach people, right? The
Yeah.
structure and the step by step. And so I feel like that kind of gave me just a little bit of a leg up with speaking to ChatGPT and the prompting too, but really relying on like the skills that you just innately have, and then also remembering to implement those like specific tips.
Exactly. I think that's a really smart thing. Like, I mean, using it in a way that augments you. It's an extension. Like, I think AI, like, I want to be an AI augmented human, not because I want to be a machine, but because I actually don't want to have to work all the time. And when I am working, I want to be as effective as possible, so that I don't have to do crazy hours behind a computer, basically.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Okay. So this is a topic that's been coming up a lot lately. So I interviewed Dr. Nikki Sweeney from Australia. She's from AI Her Way. And one of her big messages is trying to bring more women into this space, and also getting more women to use these tools, because not only will, like, if we don't use these tools, will the wage income gap between men and women increase, but also, the tools are being trained on the
Yeah.
users who are using them. And if women aren't using them, then, it's not great. And I was like, why do you think that is, that like women aren't using these tools as much as men? And she said there's like a bunch of different reasons. Like, women aren't usually in STEM topics or tech spaces and stuff like that. But also, women are more concerned with how they're represented, possibly in society, with like authenticity and all that different stuff. And then also that we want to be presenting ourselves as if we are doing hard work, so that we're being taken seriously, right? And I think that this is a huge like shift that we all need to make, because I've definitely had conversations with people where they're like, well, I feel like it's cheating to use AI tools, or I feel like I'm cutting corners and stuff like that. But as women, I think we all need to embrace that these tools are here to help us, and we should use them in a way that feels aligned and good for us, but like use them, right?
To be intentional. There are some times where you should not use AI and claim it's your own. Like, okay, you should never do that. But there are some times where it really doesn't matter. Like, I had a fight with a client who, and I've been running an informal experiment. Whenever I get pushback on using AI in anything, I will ask, Why not? And I get exactly the same responses, especially from women. I don't want to be seen as cheating. What if down the line it affects my credibility? What if? The big corporations out there, they're not going to be like holding on to their souls and like, oh, like what we need to do is we need to be intentional. Where in your brand, where in your business does it make sense to use AI, right? If you are someone who is heavy in the community and all you use social media for is distributing your content, and most people come to you through other organic channels or referrals, you don't actually need to be writing a really heavily curated LinkedIn post. I built a newsletter redistribution system in Notion with Notion AI. And I'll send you the link because it's a template. It's like a free template. I just like built it for fun. So what you do is you literally put newsletter in the copy of Notion and you can pre-prompt it with exactly what you want in your post. And so what I've done is I said, okay, I want one long form LinkedIn post. I want one tweet that is multiple threads of the entire post, just like a retweet of the whole newsletter. And then I want another tweet reflecting on a personal quote in the article. All I did is obviously the newsletter had to be written, and I just copied one of my previous posts. And literally instantly, I had an option of posts in the exact format I wanted. Yes, it took me an hour to set up because I know Notion well. So it took me an hour to set it up. Thereafter, it will take me however long it takes me to write my newsletter. But instead of having to sit for 2 hours to write 5 pieces of posts, I can get my authentic piece of content out in front of more people by sharing it on social media. Because social media isn't a very important platform for me, for example. And like the one that's not very important for me personally is UX copy in my community. Click this button, or don't forget to do this, or like, here's a reminder email for your event. All of that a human does not have to do. And there's actually this really cool diagram. I don't know, it's a comic, but it basically says that there's a good ratio of how much time you save by automating something, right? Like if you do a thing for 5 seconds, 5 times a day, you save 25 seconds if you automate it, right? But if you do that thing for 5 seconds every day for 5 years, imagine how much time you save. Whereas if you do something once a year for 1 hour, over 5 years, you don't actually save that much time. So it's not worth automating. Like as an entrepreneur, you have to be like a Pareto principle, focus on the 20% of things. And honestly, everyone else is doing it. If you're not doing it, you're actually going to fall behind and you're going to not know how to use important technology required to get jobs. I think sorry
Yes.
to keep going on, but I think that like
No,
typing
lady.
is a very good example, right? When typing was invented in like the 1700s and then more formalized in the 1800s, and at first, not many people knew how to type. In fact, then it became like an entire job where one whole person was required to type. Then came computers and the internet. And now, can you imagine hiring someone to do your typing? It seems
Right?
insane, right? It seems totally insane to do something like that. And AI, I think, is going to become something like that, where it is a tool that gets you 10 times your productivity at half of your energy. Why wouldn't you use it?
Yes, I love it. Oh my gosh, so much gold there too. And you brought up Notion, which we are going to geek out about, guys, because I definitely want to pick your brain about that stuff. I think that it's this mindset shift that we just really need to flip and hold on to for ourselves, that we are allowed to use these tools. It's not cutting corners. And I love how you did define like the hierarchy, right? Of like what is important in my brand, what is like the core piece of content that I get my hands dirty in, and then also what are those like repetitive pieces of content. Even my podcast show notes, I'm like, dude, I write these every week. Like, do people really pay attention to podcast captions? Like, not really. And I love as well that you brought up the fact that we can use these tools for content repurposing. This is something that I've been trying to just shout from the rooftops too, is a lot of people, when they just start using these tools, they expect these tools to just do an entire task for them and take over for them in a way where they're like, okay, I'm going to have it write me a social media caption. Okay, I'm going to have it write me a blog post or write me an email. But it's like, no, what if you have it repurpose your email into several different pieces of content using your own words? And oh man, the time saving thing too. Lady, earlier this year, I did a live training and I kind of broke down a time saved with AI tools chart,
Okay.
because also I get annoyed with the people who are like, create an entire month of content in 30 seconds. And it's like, no, that's
No.
not realistic. So I like broke down realistic numbers based on my tasks and stuff.
Cool.
And it still was saving like 3 hours a day, 15 hours a week, and 70 hours a month. Like being kind of realistic with the stuff. I was like,
I think
this is insane.
I only think you have to be scared of AI if you like being lazy at your job. Honestly, I really do, because AI can do everything averagely well. And if that's how much work you're willing to put in, that's what AI can take over. But obviously, like you say, AI requires smart people to operate to be effective. And I think smart people being people who have learned how to use the tool and use it for good, I hope.
And also, too, I mean, and guys, we don't want to exclude the men. I know that there are men out there who care about this stuff too, but if you are a person who cares about authenticity, who cares about the quality of your work, you're still the gatekeeper for your brand, and you're not going to be lazy. You're not going to turn your brand into a robot. You're going to save time and still be putting in effort to make sure that your content aligns, or like the way you're using AI tool aligns, right? So
Yeah.
I love it, lady. Okay, we have to talk about Notion
Yes.
because I am so excited. And oh my gosh, definitely we want to share the link for your new Notion content planner thing because that sounds awesome. I myself, we ran our one of our signature courses, Content Made Easy with ChatGPT for the first time
Oh,
last month at the time of this recording. And I actually created my content planner in Notion. And I know that there's so much more that we can do still, right? So I guess, okay, let's start with just talking a little bit about Notion because I know that some people, especially in the entrepreneur space, love Notion, right? And fully accept it. And then some people are kind of like frustrated with it or hesitant about it. Can
yeah.
you like share or speak to that at all?
I think Notion is a brilliant all-purpose tool, but it requires a lot of expertise to use well. It really does. I've onboarded individuals and then I've also onboarded an enterprise company, 300 people onto Notion. When people don't do the training, it all flops. I have like other onboarding I take people through for Notion. So if you're overwhelmed by Notion, it is very overwhelming. I started using Notion when it came out in university. Basically, when I used Notion, they first had like, here's a block and start with the block. And right now, I don't think most people realize Notion at its very base level is a block. One little block that can be turned into a page or into literally an infinite amount of things. And that's where it starts to get complex because Notion is as good as what you are able to build it to be, if that makes sense. So if you have a very good use case, you need to share your newsletter. Let's use that as an example. You may have a really good use case, and everyone might say Notion is brilliant for that. But if you don't know the functionality that can get you the output, then you won't be able to put those pieces together. It's kind of like maths. You need to know that if you add a 1 and a 3 and you use a multiplication sign with them, this is what it's going to do. So you have to kind of know how all those features work together. And if you don't, it becomes really difficult. So I think a lot of people jump into Notion and they just use templates and you've never built the thing. So you don't know how it works. You don't actually know how your data is being used. You don't know how anything is put together. So you may pay however much to build this amazing Notion board, but you can't use it. And the second it breaks, everything falls over.
Yes, okay. And also to follow that up, guys, because I will speak, I hear you with like that. And also, I myself was not really understanding Notion that much. I've always been more of an Airtable person, and then Airtable has been just like updating their pricing system. I'm like, dude, I'm sorry, I can't pay all this for Airtable. And then I kind of went over to Notion. I'm like, okay, Notion actually has the capabilities of Airtable Plus. So I started dipping my toes. I will say that yes, like you're so right. When you understand the back end, it does help to like go in, play around, build some things out. One thing that I've been doing too is going into the templates that I have accumulated over the years and like really seeing how did they do this? Oh, what did they do with this? And then I was finally able to build out our content planner. It's actually a planner that I have been using for years. I kind of built out for myself in Airtable. And I was like moving that over to Notion. And then I started dabbling around in Notion. I'm like, oh, I can do so much more. I'm going to do this. I can make it pretty. I can lay it out, you know, like all this different stuff. But so it is complicated, guys. As someone who myself was hesitant and a little bit frustrated and scared of Notion. But exactly, like I do always encourage people to use the tools that make sense for them and whatnot too. But let's talk a little bit about the AI features in Notion, because I've only really played around with it just a little bit, where it's like in a database in Notion and you can autofill the cells within a table or something. I'm like, oh, this is so great because you can have ChatGPT brainstorm content ideas in a table format. You can copy paste that into the table in Notion and then have Notion AI autofill other things that might not be done by ChatGPT or something. I don't know, lady. Tell us your thoughts. How have you been using the AI features?
This might be a bit controversial. I'm not a fan of the content it writes. I'm not a fan at all. I actually would rather pull in my AI responses through Zapier from ChatGPT into Notion. But what people miss is how amazing Notion AI is at formatting. So, for example, I can go into Notion AI and you just press space, right? That's how you activate it. Click space and you can say, write me a list of 25 random fruit, and it will write you a list. And then you can say, now add this to a table for me in column A. And then it will literally add it and create the table for you. Notion AI will format that for you. Then you can even say to it, okay, cool. Now help me add how I've got this many apples, this many this. And you can literally get it to write you a whole shopping list. And then there's actually a button where you can turn that table directly into a database. So you don't have to download or copy paste. That table automatically becomes a database. And if you've set the top row as like the header row, then it will automatically become your properties. And then you just have to change your property type. That to me is so powerful, because formatting docs, and especially formatting Notion, can be really frustrating. I love how Notion is really generative in terms of, like, I don't like how it writes at all, but it's really good at coming up with lots of ideas. That's like the really powerful use. And then if you start thinking from a company's perspective, Notion AI can search your entire Notion database, your entire Notion workspace. So you can literally ask Notion AI, like if you remember sometime 5 years ago, you added a note at this meeting in Notion somewhere. You can ask Notion AI, what did we discuss? It will summarize your notes. It will give you all the relevant pages where that information was sourced from. So as a knowledge base, if you can upload all of your content into Notion, you basically have an LLM. You literally have your own LLM where you can search for everything. And a little tip most people don't know, you can actually ask Notion AI to help you with a Notion problem. So if you're like, I'm trying to learn how to change this database like this, or you can ask Notion AI and it will give you the right articles on the FAQ page, or it will suggest an answer. It's like a mini assistant that just does the work you really don't want to do.
Totally. I love these tips, lady. And thank you too, because again, I feel like, and maybe this is just me, maybe I'm like everyone else, maybe it's actually me, like thinking about AI tools as always like defaulting to writing copy or coming up with ideas or like whatever it is. But there's so many other ways that we can use this as the tech troubleshooting. I've been using ChatGPT for that. And I love that you can just ask within Notion, and also the formatting stuff too. That's something that I've definitely been playing around with ChatGPT, but the fact that we can do that within Notion itself, that makes it so easy. Have you been playing around with linking Notion and Zapier quite a lot? Is there anything like specifically that's super helpful that you've been doing that?
Well, there are. So one of the coolest things is you can download like Web Clipper. The one I'm using at the moment is a Chrome extension called Save to Notion. You can literally screenshot any piece on any page and it will save it to Notion into the right database where you told it to save it. I used to do that in Notion and Zapier, but Save to Notion does it, so why not? Save your zaps. I got to stay on the low tiers. What I really like about Notion is I actually use it with my community. So if someone, for example, has a question, because we have a bunch of marketing experts in our community. So if someone asks a question, then my API pulls that post into Notion. So I have a database of our top questions, and so that I can build FAQs and start creating more content. In a way, I use Notion to capture a lot of ideas. What I'll also do is with Zapier, I'm trying to use it for community management in sense of, okay, I have these members and once a month I want to pull their engagement stats, right? Circle is what I use, but I struggle a bit with it sometimes because it doesn't offer on the lower prices. You don't get all the benefits, right? I try to pull out my data and I use Zapier to clean that data and put it into Notion so that I can generate my own reports. And my Notion boards are almost already preset in the views I need so that I can instantly see, okay, these are the most engaged people in my community. These are people who I may need to check in with. These are consultants who are not maybe helping so much. We may need to pull them in a little. So I find that is really useful, pulling databases, because Zapier tables are great, but also limited on the lower price tiers.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. I'm chuckling over here because it is so funny. This is such an issue with like tech these days, in general, tech, but then also you start adding AI tools to it and all the
Mm-hmm.
different stuff. And it's like, oh my gosh, the subscriptions add up, you guys. I'm also setting boundaries with AI tools too, and
Yes.
being like, okay, what can we like try? What is the best option, because that's always something to think about. And so thanks for sharing that. Well, oh my goodness. Thank you for sharing with us. I really, really enjoyed this conversation. Can you please share with everyone how they can connect with you and find out more about you? Because I know they'll want to do that for sure.
Yes, definitely. I think the best place to connect with me is LinkedIn, to be honest. It's just my full name, Candice Grobler, on LinkedIn. So I'll share the links. There's it's literally I've got a free portion of my community with lots of Notion resources. So I'll share that with you there as well. So if anyone's interested, actually I'm like trying very hard not to turn my community into a Notion community, because I like keep selling myself for community stuff and people keep coming to me for Notion stuff, which is hilarious. So we'll have to see about that.
Yes, we will love to check that out. Thank you so much, Candice. I've so enjoyed this.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.